and really getting a student loan back then, wasn't really always the easiest thing to achieve, and college was really for those who were a little bit more privileged. But he was really hoping that because Dr. Peter Buck was a family friend, he said to Fred, he was thinking that when Dr. Buck came to visit their house, that he was going to ask Dr. Buck, could you maybe help get me through college? Would you maybe sponsor me and help get me to that next level, that next education? And Dr. Peter Buck, I don't know why he did this. The story is not really explain why he did this, but he decided instead that no, he wasn't going to just give Fred DeLuca an education. He was going to give him $1,000 as a gift to open a submarine sandwich shop where he could raise his own money to go to college. I talked to somebody at Subway. I called the corporate offices and I spoke to a gentleman, and he says, Fred often tells the story that he was just too stupid to know he couldn't fail. So his first submarine shop was called Pete's Sandwich Shop, and it was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And they just had no idea how to run a submarine shop. But there they were. They had a storefront. They had a business. And through the promotion of their friends and family and things, and knowing that this was something that he was doing to try to get to college, he gained support from his family and friends. And this went on for about 9 months before it came the wintertime, and traditionally in the northern climates, in the wintertime, a lot of your cold cuts and things like that, they're really not popular lunch items. And so he saw his business starting to fade a little bit. And his submarine shop could have faded right into obscurity, into the fear of winter, into the darkness of saying, no one's going to come to my sandwich shop in the winter because it's too cold and people don't eat sandwiches in the winter. They eat hot foods, they eat soup. No, this was a good idea for a while, but it ain't going to work. No. Fred could have went there. But like I said, he was too stupid to know that that was the truth of what he was supposed to do. What did Fred do instead? He opened a second shop across town. He opened a second shop across town with the idea of thanking his customers that had promoted his business up to that point. He wanted to thank them and say, we're grateful that you have helped us grow. And by the way, why don't you come visit our other submarine sandwich that just opened across town? Today, Subway as we know it has 32,658 expansions of faith, of growth. His first franchise came in 1974. This was in 1965 and 66. And his business continued to steadily grow to the point where he had about 8 or 9 stores. And his original goal, after he decided to expand, was he wanted to get to 33 stores because there was another local sandwich chain in the Northeast that had 32 stores. And he wanted to be the biggest chain in the Northeast. He wanted to have the biggest submarine shop chain in the Northeast. They now have the biggest franchisee chain in the world. 32,000 franchises. Extraordinary example of what stepping out in faith, in the face of fear, in the face of doubt, in the face of the unknown, what that example of faith, stepping into your dream, giving it all to your dream, how that can multiply 32,000-fold. And I think another important essence of this lesson is the fact that when he expanded in gratitude. He expanded with the idea of thanking and being grateful for what he had. He could have looked at his books and like, wow, boy, if I spend all my money on this next thing, I'm not going to have any money left. He could have been totally bound up with fear. But it's with his expansion of gratefulness, expansion of being grateful for what he had, is where the blessing was. When you're passing a subway this week, which you will, there's one on Main Street, there's one there by the Kmart. Remember the dream that came out of being grateful. I think of times in my life when I had an opportunity to claim what was mine, to stand in my faith, to do something that I'd never done before. I remember a time when it was the Millennium Eve. Remember the Millennium Eve? Remember Y2K? Fear. Although sometimes my computer runs like there's something wrong with it, but the millennium for a lot of musicians was the best payday that they've ever had. It was the party of all parties. We were going to get together and we were going to, celebrate. The tickets for all the dinners were twice as much, and so naturally musicians charged twice as much. And that particular night, I found myself making more money in one night than I ever had in my life. And what had sort of crept into my mind was the fact that I had to use a drummer that I had never used before. And I was so uncomfortable with this because I just couldn't get my regular drummer. And so I had to call around, and so somebody recommended this guy to me, and he says, yeah, call this guy. He does a really good job. And so the whole couple of weeks leading up to New Year's, I found myself being a little bit nervous, and just I would get some anxiety attacks. God, they're paying me so much money, and boy, I've got to do a good job. And then something clicked inside of me. And I decided, you know what? I am going to do a good job. I am going to do the best job that I ever have in my life. And I am not going to worry. We're going to knock them out the back door of that establishment that we're playing. And we're just going to have the best time ever. And I started walking around just knowing and owning that thought. And saying, I'm going to have the best little power trio that I've ever had in my life. And New Year's Eve came, and I was so ready and so confident. And we stood up there, and we entertained the crowd all the way till 1 o'clock. We played a little bit of overtime. They loved us. They absolutely loved us. And I owned who I was. And from that, my band was able to expand, and I became one of the most successful musicians in Southwest Florida over the next 5 years. The drummer that I was introduced to ended up being one of my very dear friends, and he ended up playing with me on hundreds and hundreds of gigs, not to mention 2 CDs. But stepping out in faith and not stepping out in fear is what will bring you your highest good, even though it may be scary. There's